The dust from the supply truck had barely settled when Sergeant Alina Reyes stepped down onto the grounds of Forward Operating Base Wilson in eastern Afghanistan. She was small, 5'3" on a good day, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and a face that made her look younger than her 28 years. Her uniform was clean, almost too clean for a combat zone, and she carried only a small duffel bag. The soldiers unloading supplies barely glanced at her. "Lost, ma'am?" One of them called out, not bothering to hide his smirk. He was young, maybe 22, with the confidence of someone who had been in country for a few months and thought he knew everything. Alina turned to face him. "No, I'm exactly where I need to be." "Admin building's that way," another soldier said, pointing. "If you're here for the clerks." Alina said nothing. She had learned long ago that explaining herself to people like this was a waste of time. She simply nodded and walked toward the command building, her boots crunching on the gravel. Behind her, she heard one of them say, "Another desk officer, probably never even qualified on her sidearm." His friend laughed. "Give her a week, she'll be crying to go home." Alina kept walking. She had heard worse, much worse. Forward Operating Base Wilson was a mid-sized installation, home to about 300 soldiers. It sat in a valley surrounded by mountains, a strategic location for monitoring enemy movement in the region. The base had the usual features: concrete barriers, guard towers, rows of temporary buildings, and the constant hum of generators. Alina found the command building and stepped inside, grateful for the blast of air conditioning. A sergeant sat at the front desk, barely looking up from his computer. "Help you." "Sergeant Alina Reyes, reporting as ordered." He glanced at her now, his eyes traveling from her face to her uniform and back again. "You're Reyes." "Yes." He typed something into his computer, frowned, then typed some more. "Says here you're supposed to report directly to Colonel Morrison, but that can't be right." "Why not?" "Because Colonel Morrison is the base commander. He doesn't meet with—" The sergeant stopped himself, but Alina knew how he had been about to finish that sentence. "He doesn't meet with people like you." "Nevertheless," Alina said calmly, "that's who I'm supposed to report to." The sergeant picked up his phone and dialed. "Sir, there's a Sergeant Reyes here who says she's supposed to report to you." A pause. "Yes, sir, right away, sir." He hung up and looked at Alina with new confusion. "He's expecting you, second door on the left." "Thank you." Alina walked down the hallway and knocked on the colonel's door. "Enter." Colonel Thomas Morrison was a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s, with gray hair and a face lined by 2 decades of military service. He stood when Alina entered, and she snapped to attention. "Sergeant Reyes, reporting as ordered, sir." "At ease, Sergeant." Morrison came around his desk and extended his hand. Alina shook it, nodding his firm grip and the way his eyes assessed her carefully. "Glad you made it safely. Was the flight rough?" "Nothing I couldn't handle, sir." Morrison smiled slightly. "I'm sure, please sit." Alina sat in the chair across from his desk while Morrison returned to his seat. He opened a folder, a thin one, and glanced at whatever was inside. Alina knew what he was looking at: her official file, the sanitized version that revealed almost nothing about what she really did. "I'll be honest, Sergeant. When Command told me you were coming, I had questions." "I'm sure you did, sir." "I run a tight base here. Good soldiers, good morale. We do our job, and we do it well. But I don't like surprises, and I don't like being kept in the dark about my own personnel." Alina nodded. She understood his frustration. "What did they tell you, sir?" "That you'd be here for an undetermined amount of time, that you'd need access to the armory and the range, that I was to provide you with any support you requested, no questions asked." Morrison closed the folder. "They also told me that your presence here is classified and that I'm not to discuss you with anyone outside this room." "That's correct, sir." "Care to tell me what this is about?" Alina hesitated. Morrison seemed like a good man, a good commander, but her orders were clear. "I'm sorry, sir, I can't." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "Are you intelligence?" "I can't answer that, sir." "Special operations?" "Sir." I know, you can't answer." Morrison sighed and leaned back in his chair. "All right, Sergeant, I don't like it, but I have my orders too. You'll be assigned quarters in Building 7. I'll make sure you have access to whatever you need." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your cooperation." Don't thank me yet. This base runs on routine and trust. You're going to stick out and my soldiers are going to have questions. Questions I can't answer. I'll try to keep a low profile, sir. Morrison gave her a look that suggested he doubted that was possible. Dismissed, Sergeant. Alina stood, saluted, and left the office. The quarters in Building 7 were basic but functional. A narrow bed, a footlocker, a small desk, and a metal cabinet. Alina had stayed in much worse. She unpacked her duffel bag, which didn't take long. A few changes of clothes, basic toiletries, and a locked case containing her personal sidearm. Everything else she needed would be here on the base. She changed into her PT uniform and headed to the armory. It was late afternoon, and the heat was starting to fade into the cooler evening temperatures. Soldiers were finishing their daily duties, heading to the mess hall or the recreation building. The armory was a reinforced concrete structure near the center of the base. Alina found the sergeant in charge, a heavy-set man named Collins, sitting at a desk behind a wire cage. "Help you?" he asked, not looking up from his paperwork. "I need to check out a rifle." "What's your unit?" "I don't have one. I'm attached to command." Collins looked up now, his eyes narrowing. "Attached to command, doing what?" "That's classified." He laughed. "Classified, right. Look, lady, I don't hand out weapons to people I don't know. Come back with proper authorization." Alina pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it through the cage. Collins took it, scanned it, and his expression changed. "This is signed by Colonel Morrison." "Yes." "Says I'm to provide you with any weapon system you request, plus ammunition, no questions asked." "That's correct." Collins stared at the paper like it might be a forgery. Then he looked at Alina again, taking in her small frame and young face. "What do you need?" "An M110 sniper rifle, match-grade ammunition, 500 rounds to start." Collins blinked. "You're joking." "I'm not." "Lady, do you even know what an M110 is?" "It's a semi-automatic sniper rifle chambered in 7.62mm NATO, effective range up to 800 meters, weighs 15 pounds without optics." Alina's voice was flat, factual. "I'm familiar with it." Being familiar with it and being qualified on it are two different things. "I'm qualified." Collins shook his head. "I need to see documentation, range certification at minimum." Alina's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her voice level. "Sergeant Collins, that authorization from Colonel Morrison supersedes any standard procedure. I need that rifle. Now." "I don't care what the colonel says. I'm not handing a sniper rifle to some pencil pusher from command who probably can't hit the broad side of a barn." Other soldiers had started to gather, drawn by the raised voices. Alina could feel their eyes on her, could hear their whispers. "Is there a problem here?" A new voice cut through the tension. Alina turned to see a lieutenant approaching. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of swagger that came from limited experience and unlimited confidence. "No problem, sir," Collins said. "Just explaining to this sergeant that she needs proper certification before I can issue her a weapon." The lieutenant looked at Alina with barely concealed amusement. "A sniper rifle, you?" "Yes, sir." He actually laughed. "Sweetheart, those rifles weigh almost as much as you do. Maybe we should start you off with something more appropriate. An M4, perhaps? Or we have some nice 9mm pistols." The soldiers around them were openly grinning now. Alina felt the familiar heat of humiliation creeping up her neck, but she forced it down. She had not come here to make friends or earn respect from people who would never give it. "I have authorization from Colonel Morrison," she said quietly. "I need an M110. "Tell you what," the lieutenant said, his smile widening. "You go to the range, show us you can handle a standard rifle, and then maybe we'll talk about getting you certified on the bigger guns. How's that sound?" "Sir, I don't think." "That wasn't a suggestion, Sergeant. It was an order." Alina's jaw tightened. She could pull rank in a different way, could make a phone call that would end this lieutenant's career. But her mission here required discretion. Drawing attention to herself would only make things harder. "Yes, sir," she said finally. "Good." Sergeant Collins set her up with an M4 and some targets. "Let's see what she can do." Collins smirked and disappeared into the armory. The lieutenant crossed his arms, clearly enjoying himself. The other soldiers moved closer, sensing entertainment. This was going to be a long deployment. Collins returned with an M4 rifle and 3 magazines. Range is open for another hour. Let's make this quick. Alina took the rifle, checked it with practiced efficiency, and followed the group to the firing range. The sun was setting now, painting the mountains orange and red. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. The range consisted of 10 firing positions with targets set at various distances. The closest was 25 meters, the farthest 300. Standard qualification distances. Position 3, the lieutenant said. 40 rounds, let's see if you can hit anything. A crowd had gathered. Word had spread quickly that some new desk sergeant was about to embarrass herself on the range. There had to be at least 30 soldiers watching now, all of them waiting for her to fail. Alina moved to position 3 and settled into a prone position. The rifle felt comfortable in her hands, familiar. She loaded a magazine and chambered a round. Targets at 50 meters, the lieutenant announced. Fire when ready. Alina took a breath, let it out slowly, and began to fire. The first shot hit center mass. So did the second, and the third. Alina worked through the magazine with mechanical precision, each round finding its mark. She reloaded without looking, her hands moving automatically through the motions she had performed thousands of times. The laughter from the crowd had died. Soldiers watched in silence as Alina methodically destroyed the target at 50 meters, then requested the target be moved to 100 meters, then 200, then 300. Every shot was perfect, not just good, perfect. When she finished, the lieutenant walked down to check the targets himself. He returned looking pale. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Alina stood and handed the rifle back to Sergeant Collins. "I'm someone who needs an M110. Are we done here?" Collins took the rifle with shaking hands. I'll get you that rifle, Sergeant." "Thank you." As Alina walked back to the armory, the crowd parted for her. The whispers had changed tone now, no longer mocking but confused, uncertain. Collins set up the M110 on the counter with reverent care. It was a beautiful weapon, deadly and precise. Alina checked it over, tested the action, and examined the scope. "Ammunition?" she asked. Collins produced 5 boxes of match-grade rounds. 500, like you asked. Need anything else?" "A cleaning kit, and access to the range every morning, 500 hours." "I'll make sure you have it." Alina signed for the equipment and carried it back to her quarters. Behind her, she could hear the soldiers talking, speculating about who she was and why she was here. Let them talk. It did not matter. In her room, she cleaned the rifle even though it was already clean, then reassembled it with her eyes closed. Muscle memory. The weapon became an extension of her body, as familiar as her own hands. Her phone buzzed, a secure text from her handler. "Package arrives in 3 days, maintain cover." Alina deleted the message and lay back on her bed. 3 days. She could manage 3 days. The next morning, she was at the range at 5 a.m. as planned. The base was just waking up, the sky turning from black to gray. Alina set up at the farthest position and began her routine. 50 shots at various distances, various positions, prone, kneeling, standing, wind calculations, elevation adjustments. She needed to know how this specific rifle performed, its quirks and preferences. She was on her 40th shot when she sensed someone watching. She finished the shot, then looked over to see Colonel Morrison standing at the edge of the range. "Morning, sir," she said, not leaving her position. "Morning, Sergeant. Mind if I watch?" "Not at all, sir." Morrison settled onto a bench while Alina finished her routine. When she was done, he walked over to examine her targets. His eyebrows rose. "That's exceptional shooting, Sergeant." "Thank you, sir." "I heard about yesterday, the incident at the armory." "It was handled, sir." Morrison turned to face her. "Lieutenant Peters is a good officer, but he's young. He made assumptions he shouldn't have made." "With respect, sir, he's not the first and he won't be the last." "Probably not," Morrison admitted, "but he should have shown more respect. I'll speak with him." "That's not necessary, sir. I'd prefer to avoid drawing more attention." Morrison smiled slightly. "I think that ship has sailed. The whole base is talking about the mystery sergeant who can outshoot our best marksmen." He paused. "You're not really a desk officer, are you?" Alina checked her rifle's safety. I'm whatever my mission requires me to be, sir. And I still can't know what that mission is. No, sir, I'm sorry. Morrison nodded, accepting the answer. All right, but Sergeant Reyes, if there's danger coming to this base, I need to know. These are my soldiers, my responsibility. I understand, sir. If there's any threat to base security, you'll be informed immediately. It was the most she could give him, and Morrison seemed to recognize that. Fair enough. Carry on, Sergeant. The next 2 days passed in a similar pattern. Alina maintained her routine: morning shooting, physical training, meals eaten alone, evenings spent in her quarters. Soldiers stared at her wherever she went, but no one approached. She had become a mystery, and mysteries made people nervous. On the third morning, Alina's phone buzzed at 0300 hours. The message was simple: package incoming 800, LZ Delta. She dressed quickly and moved through the dark base to the landing zone on the eastern edge of the compound. LZ Delta was used for supply helicopters and occasional VIP transport. It was relatively isolated, which was exactly why it had been chosen. At 0745, she heard the distant thump of rotor blades. A black hawk appeared over the mountains, flying low and fast. It landed in a cloud of dust, and 2 men jumped out. They were dressed in civilian clothes, but Alina recognized the signs. Former military, now contractors or intelligence. The taller one carried a reinforced case. Sergeant Reyes, he shouted over the noise of the helicopter. That's me. He handed her the case. Everything you requested, good hunting. They climbed back into the helicopter without another word, and it lifted off immediately. The whole exchange had taken less than 60 seconds. Alina carried the case back to her quarters, not caring who saw her now. Things were about to accelerate, and her cover was going to become irrelevant very soon. Inside her room, she opened the case. A laptop encrypted and hardened against tampering, 3 USB drives containing surveillance data, a satellite phone, and a single photograph of a man's face. Karim Haddad, a high-value target who had been evading capture for 3 years. Intelligence suggested he was in this region, using the mountain passes to move weapons and fighters. Multiple operations had failed to locate him. He was smart, careful, and extremely dangerous. But 6 weeks ago, an asset had provided new information. Haddad was meeting with his lieutenants to plan a major attack. The meeting would happen somewhere in the mountains visible from Fob Wilson. The exact location and time were still unknown, but when it happened, there would be a narrow window to take him out. Alina's mission was simple: kill Karim Haddad, do it quietly, do it with minimal risk to American forces, and don't get caught. She was one of only 7 snipers in the entire U.S. military with the clearance and skill set for this kind of operation. In certain circles, she was known by her call sign, Black Talon. Alina spent the morning reviewing the intelligence, satellite photos of the region, movement patterns, possible meeting locations. She had 3 potential sites identified, each requiring a different approach. At noon, she went to find Colonel Morrison. His secretary tried to stop her, but Alina walked past without slowing. Morrison looked up in surprise as she entered. Sergeant Reyes, you can't just... Sir, I need 3 things: a vehicle, preferably a Humvee, a driver with mountain experience, and permission to leave the base for field reconnaissance. Morrison's expression hardened. Absolutely not. We don't send solo patrols outside the wire. It's too dangerous. This isn't a patrol, sir. Then what is it? Alina hesitated, then made a decision. Morrison deserved to know at least part of the truth. Sir, there's a high-value target in the area. I'm here to eliminate him, but I need to scout potential firing positions first. Morrison stood slowly. You're an assassin. I'm a sniper, sir. There's a difference. Not much of one from where I'm standing. He walked to his window, looking out over the base. Does this target pose a threat to my soldiers? Yes, sir, a significant one. If the operation is successful, it will save American lives. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. And if you fail? Then nothing changes. The target will continue operating as before, but I won't fail, sir. You're that confident? I'm that good. Morrison turned to face her. All right, Sergeant, you'll have your vehicle and your driver, but I'm sending a security detail with you. 2 additional vehicles, 8 soldiers, non-negotiable. Alina wanted to argue, but she recognized the compromise for what it was. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Just make sure my soldiers come back safely. Elena assembled her gear and met the convoy at the motor pool at 1400 hours. The driver was a specialist named Rodriguez, mid-20s, with the calm demeanor of someone who had driven these mountain roads many times. "Where we headed, Sergeant?" he asked. "North Ridge, about 15 clicks from here." Rodriguez whistled. "That's rough terrain. Hope you've got a good reason." "I do." The convoy rolled out through the main gate, and Elena felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with leaving the wire. Out here, there were no barriers, no safety nets. Just mountains, enemies, and the thin line of soldiers trying to hold both back. They drove for 90 minutes, climbing switchback roads that hugged the mountainside. The vehicles behind them maintained a defensive spacing, and Elena could see the gunners scanning the ridgelines for threats. Finally, they reached the location Elena had identified from the satellite photos. A rocky outcropping that provided a clear view of 3 valleys and the mountain passes between them. "This is it," she told Rodriguez. "I need 20 minutes." She got out and moved to the edge of the outcropping. Behind her, the security details spread out in a defensive perimeter. Elena ignored them and focused on the terrain. She pulled out a rangefinder and began taking measurements. Distance to various landmarks, elevation changes, wind patterns. She noted everything in a small waterproof notebook. This position would work for 2 of the 3 potential meeting sites. The third would require a different location, higher up and more exposed. "Sergeant, we've got movement on the southern ridge," one of the security team called out. Elena pulled out binoculars and scanned the area. 200 meters away, 3 men with AK-47s were moving along a trail. They had spotted the convoy. "They're just local militia," Elena said calmly. "They won't engage unless we threaten them." "How do you know?" "Because if they were Taliban, we'd already be taking fire." The men watched the convoy for a few more minutes, then disappeared back into the rocks. The soldiers relaxed slightly. Elena finished her reconnaissance and returned to the Humvee. "All right, Rodriguez, let's head back." The return trip was uneventful. As they pulled back through the base gates, Elena saw soldiers staring at her again. The mystery was growing deeper. That evening, she compiled her notes and sent an encrypted report to her handler. 2 viable positions identified, still waiting for confirmation on target location and timing, ready to execute on short notice. The response came back within an hour. "Well done. Intelligence indicates meeting will occur within the next 72 hours. Stand by." 72 hours, 3 days. Elena cleaned her rifle again and tried to sleep, but her mind was racing. This was what she had trained for, what she was built for. The waiting was always the hardest part. The next morning at the range, Elena was making adjustments to her scope when Lieutenant Peters approached. He looked uncomfortable, and Elena braced herself for another confrontation. "Sergeant Reyes, do you have a minute?" "Yes, sir." Peters glanced around to make sure they were alone. "I wanted to apologize for the other day at the armory. I made assumptions about you that were unprofessional." Elena studied him. The apology seemed genuine. "Apology accepted, sir." "Can I ask you something, off the record?" "You can ask." "Who are you really? I've been in the army for 4 years, and I've never seen shooting like yours. And the way you handle yourself, you're not regular army, are you?" Elena considered how much to say. "I'm a soldier, sir, same as you. I just have a different specialty." "Sniper?" "Yes, sir." Peters nodded slowly. "I've worked with snipers before, good ones, but they don't operate alone and they don't get pulled from bases on mysterious missions. You're something else." "Does it matter what I am, sir?" "I suppose not, but the soldiers are curious. There are rumors spreading. Some think you're CIA, others think you're here to investigate the command staff. It's affecting morale." Elena sighed. This was exactly what she had hoped to avoid. "Sir, I can't discuss my mission, but I can tell you this. I'm not here to spy on anyone at this base. I'm here to do a job that will help keep soldiers safe. That's all." "Can you tell the men that? Maybe it would help if they heard it directly from you." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? You've already proven yourself on the range. They respect your skills. They just want to know you're not a threat." Elena thought about it. Peters had a point. The suspicious atmosphere wasn't good for anyone. All right, I'll speak with them, but it has to be informal, no official briefing. Fair enough. The soldiers gather at the rec building most evenings. You could stop by tonight. I'll think about it. Peters nodded and left. Alina returned to her shooting, but her concentration was broken. She had spent years learning to blend into the background, to be invisible when necessary. Speaking to a room full of soldiers went against every instinct she had. But the mission came first, and if clearing the air would make her job easier, she would do it. That evening, Alina walked to the rec building. It was a large prefab structure with pool tables, a television, some worn couches, and a small kitchen area. About 40 soldiers were inside, relaxing after their duties. The room went quiet when she entered. Alina stood near the door, suddenly unsure, but then Rodriguez, her driver from the convoy, waved her over. "Sergeant Reyes, come join us." She walked to where Rodriguez sat with a group of specialists and privates. They made room for her on one of the couches. "So," one of them said, a young woman named Chen, "are you going to tell us who you really are? The rumors are getting crazy." "What are people saying?" Alina asked. "That you're a spy, that you're here to evaluate the colonel, that you're special forces." Chen grinned. "My favorite is that you're a test. Some general sent you here to see if we'd treat a female soldier with respect. We failed, by the way." A few soldiers laughed, though it was uncomfortable laughter. "I'm not a spy," Alina said. "And I'm not here to evaluate anyone. I'm here to complete a mission that requires specialized skills. That's really all I can tell you." "But you're a sniper," another soldier said. "We saw what you did on the range. That wasn't normal marksmanship. That was elite-level shooting." Alina nodded. "Yes, I'm a sniper." "How long have you been doing it?" Chen asked. 10 years. I joined the army when I was 18. Made it through basic, then volunteered for sniper training." "They let women in sniper school?" one of the men asked, sounding skeptical. "They do if you qualify, which I did." Rodriguez leaned forward. "That convoy we ran the other day, you were scouting a position, weren't you, for a shot?" Alina met his eyes. He was smarter than she had given him credit for. "I can't discuss operational details." "But you're here to take someone out, someone important." The room was completely silent now. Alina chose her words carefully. "I'm here to protect American soldiers. That's my only mission. Everything I do is toward that goal." "By killing someone?" Chen said quietly. "Yes, by killing someone who would kill you if given the chance." One of the older sergeants spoke up from across the room. "I knew a sniper in Iraq. He saved my platoon during an ambush, took out 3 insurgents from 800 meters while we were pinned down." He looked at Alina with new respect. "You do the same kind of work?" "Similar, yes." "Then you don't owe us any explanations," the sergeant said firmly. "You do your job, we'll do ours, and we'll all go home safer." Several soldiers nodded in agreement. Alina felt some of the tension in the room ease. They talked for another hour. Alina answered what questions she could, deflected the ones she couldn't, and slowly began to see the soldiers as individuals rather than obstacles. Rodriguez told stories about growing up in Texas. Chen talked about her plans to become a veterinarian after her service ended. The older sergeant, whose name was Martinez, shared photos of his 3 daughters. By the time Alina left, she felt something she hadn't expected. Connection. These weren't just soldiers anymore, they were people she was protecting. The next morning, Alina's secure phone buzzed at 04:30. She was already awake, had been for an hour, unable to sleep. She read the message 3 times to be sure she understood it correctly. "Target confirmed, meeting tomorrow at 1400 hours. Location, Site Alpha. Authorization to engage granted. Execute at your discretion." Site Alpha, the furthest and most difficult of the 3 locations. It would require the higher position she had identified, which meant another convoy outside the wire. And the timeline was tight. Tomorrow at 1400 hours was less than 34 hours away. Alina dressed and went directly to Morrison's office. She pounded on the door until he answered, looking disheveled and half asleep. "Sergeant Reyes, it's not even 5 in the morning." "Sir, I need another convoy, today, and I need to stay outside the wire overnight." Morrison's expression changed immediately. He was fully alert now. "The target. Confirmed for tomorrow at 1400 hours. I need to be in position before dawn tomorrow, which means I need to leave this morning." "Where?" "Higher into the mountains. About 20 clicks north of where we went before. Morrison ran a hand through his hair. That's dangerous territory. We've had Taliban sightings up there. I know, sir. That's why the target chose it. You'll need a full security detail, at least 12 soldiers. Sir, with respect, a large convoy will draw attention. I need small and fast. One vehicle to drop me off, then return to base. I'll be on my own for the mission. Absolutely not. I'm not leaving one of my soldiers alone in those mountains overnight. Sir, I've done this dozens of times. It's safer if I'm alone. I can stay hidden, stay quiet. A security detail would compromise the position. Morrison shook his head. I don't care how many times you've done it. You're operating from my base, which makes you my responsibility. You get a security detail or you don't go. Elena's jaw clenched. She could pull rank, could make a call that would override Morrison's authority. But she respected him too much for that. What if they stay at a distance? Set up a defensive position a click away, close enough to respond if needed, far enough not to compromise my hide site. Morrison considered this. They stay in radio contact. You check in every 4 hours, and if anything goes wrong, you abort and return to their position immediately. Agreed. All right, I'll have the convoy ready by 0800. Who do you want as your driver? Rodriguez, he knows the terrain. Morrison nodded. I'll brief him myself. Now get out of here and let me get dressed. Elena spent the next 3 hours preparing. She packed her gear with meticulous care. The M110 rifle broken down into its case. Ammunition, 40 rounds should be more than enough. Ghillie suit for camouflage. Water, MREs, medical supplies, binoculars, rangefinder, wind meter, compass, GPS, radio, and her sidearm because you never knew. At 07:30, she joined the convoy at the motor pool. Rodriguez was there with 2 Humvees and 8 soldiers, all looking serious and alert. Morning, Sergeant, Rodriguez said. Heard you're going hunting. Something like that. One of the soldiers from the wreck building, Chen, was part of the security detail. She gave Elena a tight smile. Bring back a trophy. I'll do my best. They rolled out at 0800 sharp. The drive was longer this time and rougher. They left the established roads and followed barely visible trails up into the higher elevations. The temperature dropped as they climbed, and patches of snow appeared between the rocks. After 2 hours, they reached the drop-off point. Elena had marked it on her GPS during her planning, a widening in the trail that would allow the vehicles to turn around. This is it, she told Rodriguez. I go the rest of the way on foot. He looked at the steep terrain above them. That's got to be another 2 clicks straight up. About that. You're carrying at least 50 pounds of gear. 53, actually. Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. You're tougher than you look, Sergeant. Elena smiled. Most people are. She shouldered her pack and picked up her rifle case. Martinez, the older sergeant, approached her. The defensive position is marked on your GPS. We'll be there within 20 minutes. Radio check every 4 hours, starting at 1300. Understood, and Sergeant Martinez, if you hear gunfire from my direction, don't come running. It means the mission is complete. I'll make my way back to you. And if we don't hear from you, give me until 0600 the next morning. If I haven't made contact by then, assume the mission failed and return to base. Martinez didn't look happy about that, but he nodded. Good hunting, Black Talon. Elena froze. What did you call me? Martinez's weathered face creased into a smile. You think we don't have contacts in special operations? I made some calls, asked around about a female sniper with skills like yours. Your call sign came up. Black Talon. They say you're a ghost, that you've completed 27 successful missions without a single civilian casualty. It's 29, Elena corrected quietly, but who's counting? We'll keep your secret, Martinez said, but we wanted you to know that we know who you are and we're honored to support you. Elena felt unexpected emotion tightening her throat. Thank you, Sergeant. That means more than you know. She turned and began climbing before anyone could see the tears in he. The climb took 3 hours. The terrain was brutal, loose rocks, sheer faces, narrow ledges barely wide enough for her boots. Elena's legs burned and her lungs ached from the thin air, but she pushed through. She had endured worse in training. By noon, she reached the position she had identified from the satellite photos. It was a small depression between two rock formations, naturally camouflaged and offering a clear view of the valley below. Perfect. Alina set up her hide site with practiced efficiency. She laid out a tarp to prevent her equipment from shifting, then constructed a low blind using the ghillie suit and natural vegetation. From even 50 feet away, the position would be invisible. She assembled her rifle and mounted the scope, then began the patient work of range-finding. The suspected meeting site was a cluster of buildings in the valley, approximately 1,000 meters away. Long range, but well within her capabilities. She identified her primary target building, the largest structure, with a clear view from multiple angles. Intelligence suggested that Haddad would conduct the meeting in the main room, visible through the windows. At 1300 hours, her radio crackled. "Black Talon, this is Guardian 1, radio check." Alina keyed her mic. "Guardian 1 Black Talon, 5x5, position secure." "Copy that, we're locked in and ready. Call if you need anything." "Will do, Black Talon out." The waiting began. This was what people who weren't snipers didn't understand. The job wasn't about the shot. The shot was easy. The job was about the hours or days of absolute stillness that came before it. The patience. The mental discipline to stay alert and focused while your body screamed at you to move. Alina watched the valley through her scope. She tracked the movement of goats across a hillside. She noted the pattern of shadows as the sun moved across the sky. She felt the wind, adjusting her calculations as it shifted direction and speed. At 1700 hours, she ate an MRE without taking her eyes off the target. At 2100 hours, she allowed herself a 15-minute rest, though she didn't sleep. By midnight, the valley was dark except for a few fires in the village. The temperature dropped below freezing. Alina wore thermal layers, but the cold still seeped into her bones. She flexed her fingers periodically to maintain circulation, careful not to disturb her position. At 0400, she checked in with Martinez again. "Guardian 1 Black Talon, status unchanged, target area quiet." "Copy Black Talon, we're good here, stay warm." "Doing my best." Dawn came slowly, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Alina had been in position for 18 hours and every part of her body ached, but her mind was clear, focused. The shot window would open in 10 hours. At 0900, she saw the first sign of activity. 3 vehicles approached the target building from the south. Men got out, heavily armed, and took up security positions around the perimeter. "Advance team," the meeting was still on. Alina photographed the vehicles and the men using a small camera attached to her scope. She sent the images via encrypted transmission to her handler, along with a status update. "Target location confirmed. Security present. Proceeding as planned." The response was immediate. "Confirmed. You are authorized to engage primary target on positive ID, secondary targets at your discretion. Minimize exposure. Good luck, Black Talon." More vehicles arrived throughout the morning. By 1300 hours, there were at least 15 armed men around the building. This was bigger than intelligence had suggested. A major meeting, not just a routine check-in. Alina's heart rate elevated slightly, but she controlled her breathing. More targets meant more danger, but it also meant this was more important than she had realized. At 1345, a convoy of 3 SUVs arrived. Alina watched through her scope as men emerged from the vehicles, and then she saw him. Karim Haddad. He looked exactly like his photograph, tall, bearded, wearing traditional clothing and a dark vest. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable, who had evaded capture for years. He was wrong. Alina tracked him as he entered the building. Through the window, she could see him greeting other men, embracing them in the traditional manner. He moved to the head of a long table, clearly in charge. She adjusted her scope, compensating for distance, elevation, and the crosswind that had picked up. 1,040 meters, temperature 62 degrees, wind from the west at 8 knots, gusting to 12. She made her final calculations and settled into position. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied. The world narrowed to the space between her and the target. Haddad sat at the table, visible through the window. Center mass shot, high probability of immediate incapacitation. Alina's finger moved to the trigger. She took up the slack, feeling the resistance. And then something moved in her peripheral vision. She shifted her scope slightly and felt ice flood her veins. A woman had entered the room. No, not a woman, a girl, maybe 12 years old, wearing a bright blue dress. She moved to the table carrying a tray of tea. Alina's finger came off the trigger. The girl served tea to the men around the table, including Haddad. She smiled at something one of them said. Then she stood behind Haddad, waiting. "Damn," Alina whispered. She couldn't take the shot, not with a child in the room. The rules of engagement were absolute on that point. No shots with civilian casualties, especially children. She keyed her radio. "Guardian 1 Black Talon, we have a complication. Civilian child in the target zone. Cannot engage at this time." Martinez's voice came back tense. "Copy, Black Talon, what's your plan?" "Wait, she has to leave eventually." "How long can you hold position?" "As long as it takes." But as the minutes ticked by, the girl didn't leave. She stood behind Haddad, refilling tea, bringing food, acting as a servant. Through the scope, Alina could see her face clearly. She looked bored, tired, a child forced into adult service. 20 minutes passed, 30. The meeting continued with Haddad speaking and gesturing, other men taking notes, and the girl remained in the room. Alina's mission window was closing. Intelligence had suggested the meeting would last no more than 2 hours, ending by 1600. After that, the targets would disperse, and the opportunity would be lost. At 1500 hours, Alina made a decision. She couldn't wait for a perfect shot. She needed to create one. She adjusted her aim, moving from Haddad's center mass to his head. A headshot was more difficult, especially at this range, but it would be immediately fatal. No wounded target stumbling and putting the girl at risk. But she still needed the girl to move. Just a few feet, just enough to clear the background. Alina watched and waited, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. The girl moved to refill tea. She walked around the table. For a moment she was clear of Haddad, but his head was turned away, presenting no shot. Then Haddad called out something. The girl returned to his side. He said something else, and she laughed. He reached up and patted her shoulder in what looked like an affectionate gesture. Alina felt her jaw tighten. This monster who had killed dozens of innocent people was acting like a kind uncle to this child. The contradiction made her sick. At 1530, one of the men at the table stood and walked to the window, looking directly toward Alina's position. She froze, though she knew he couldn't possibly see her. He stood there for a long moment, then turned back to the meeting. "Too close." At 1545, Haddad stood. The meeting was ending. Alina's window was down to minutes. Haddad spoke to the assembled men, his voice carrying through the window, though Alina couldn't make out the words. He gestured emphatically, clearly giving orders or instructions. The girl moved to clear the tea glasses from the table. Her back was to Haddad. 3 feet of clearance. Alina exhaled slowly, steadying her aim. Haddad's head filled her scope. She could see individual hairs in his beard, the lines around his eyes. She accounted for wind, for distance, for the slight angle of the window glass. And then she did what she had been trained to do. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The suppressor dampened the sound to a low thump that wouldn't carry to the valley below. Through the scope, Alina saw the window shatter, saw Haddad's head snap back, saw him collapse instantly. The girl screamed and dropped the tray. Men shouted and dove for cover, pulling weapons. But they had no target. They didn't know where the shot had come from. They couldn't see Alina on the mountain, couldn't even determine the direction of fire. She chambered another round and tracked the confusion in the room. 2 men grabbed the girl and pulled her to safety. Others surrounded Haddad's body, but Alina could see from their frantic movements that he was already dead. Mission complete. She keyed her radio. "Guardian 1 Black Talon, target neutralized, exfilling now." "Copy, Black Talon. We heard the commotion on the valley floor. Nice shooting. We're ready for your return." Alina broke down her position with swift efficiency. Rifle disassembled and packed. Ghillie suit rolled up. Equipment stowed. She left no trace that she had ever been there. The climb down was faster than the climb up, though more dangerous. Loose rocks threatened to slide under her boots. She had to use her hands in several places to maintain balance with the heavy pack. But adrenaline drove her forward. The mission was complete. Haddad was dead, and she had done it without civilian casualties. She reached the defensive position 2 hours later, just as the sun was setting. Martinez and his team were ready to move, engines running. "Welcome back, Black Talon," Martinez said with a grin. "Radio traffic says the valley's in chaos. They still don't know what happened." "Good, let's keep it that way." They loaded into the vehicles and began the drive back to Fob Wilson. Elena sat in the back of the Humvee, her rifle case across her lap, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Rodriguez glanced back at her from the driver's seat. "You okay, Sergeant?" "I'm fine, just tired." "You just took out one of the most wanted men in Afghanistan from over 1,000 meters. You're allowed to be tired." Elena smiled slightly but said nothing. The truth was she didn't feel triumphant. She felt relieved. Relieved it was over, relieved the girl was safe, relieved she could finally rest. They arrived at Fob Wilson after dark. As the convoy pulled through the gates, Elena saw soldiers lining the route. They had come out to watch her return. Word had spread. They knew what she had done. As Elena stepped out of the Humvee, the soldiers began to clap. It started with Martinez and his security team, then spread through the crowd. Soon the entire base was applauding. Elena stood there, uncomfortable with the attention but too tired to protest. She nodded in acknowledgement, shouldered her rifle case, and started toward the command building. Colonel Morrison was waiting on the steps. He saluted as she approached, and Elena returned it. "Congratulations, Captain," he said. Elena blinked. "Sir, I'm a sergeant." Morrison smiled and pulled a folder from under his arm. "Not anymore. These orders came through while you were in the field. Effective immediately, you're promoted to captain. Congratulations, Black Talon." Elena took the orders with shaking hands. She had expected a commendation, maybe, but a promotion that was unexpected. "There's more," Morrison said. "General Hawkins is flying in tomorrow. He wants to meet you personally." "The theater commander? Why?" "Because Haddad wasn't just another target. He was planning something big. Intelligence found plans on his lieutenants after your shot forced them into the open. He was coordinating a major attack on 3 different bases, including this one." Morrison's expression was serious. "You didn't just complete your mission, Captain. You saved hundreds of American lives." Elena felt the weight of those words. She had known Haddad was dangerous, but this was bigger than she had imagined. "The soldiers deserve to know," she said quietly. "They supported me, they protected me, they should know what we accomplished." Morrison nodded. "I'll tell them, but first you need rest. You've been awake for how long?" 38 hours, sir." "Jesus, go sleep, Captain, that's an order." Elena saluted and headed to her quarters. Behind her, she could hear Morrison addressing the assembled soldiers, telling them about the mission, about what they had helped prevent. The applause started again, but Elena was already too far away to hear it clearly. In her room, she locked the door and finally allowed herself to collapse on the bed. Her body ached. Her mind was buzzing, but beneath the exhaustion was satisfaction. She had done her job. She had protected her fellow soldiers, and she had proven once again that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. The soldiers had laughed at her request for a rifle. They had mocked her, dismissed her, treated her like she didn't belong. And then she had shown them exactly who Black Talon was. 3 days later, Elena stood in Colonel Morrison's office with General Richard Hawkins, a 3-star general who commanded all forces in the region. He was an imposing man in his 60s, with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Captain Reyes," he said, shaking her hand firmly, "I've been reading about you, quite an impressive record." "Thank you, sir." 29 confirmed kills, all high-value targets, 0 civilian casualties, multiple commendations for valor. He looked at her with something like wonder. "And you're only 28 years old." "I've had good training, sir, and good support." "Modest, too," Hawkins smiled. "Captain, I'm here to offer you a new assignment. We're forming a specialized unit, elite snipers for precision operations throughout the theater. I want you to lead it." Elena's eyes widened. "Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to." "You're more than qualified. You're exactly what we need." Hawkins pulled out a document. "This is a direct commission to major, effective immediately. You'll have your pick of personnel, resources, and missions. You'll answer directly to me." Elena looked at the document, then at Morrison, who was beaming with pride. "I need someone who can make the impossible shots," Hawkins continued. Someone who can operate independently, think strategically, and lead by example. You've proven you can do all of that. Alina thought about it, a promotion to major, her own unit, the chance to train other snipers to share what she had learned. When would I start, sir? Immediately. I want your unit operational within 6 weeks. Alina took a deep breath, then nodded. Then I accept, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. Hawkins shook her hand again. Don't thank me yet, Major. You're going to earn every bit of that rank. After the general left, Morrison turned to Alina with a smile. From invisible sergeant to major in less than a month, that has to be some kind of record. I couldn't have done it without your support, sir. You gave me a chance when you didn't have to. I gave you access to resources. You did the rest. Morrison extended his hand. It's been an honor, Major Reyes. The honor was mine, sir. That evening, the base held a farewell gathering for Alina in the rec building. It seemed like every soldier on the base had shown up. They presented her with a plaque that read, Black Talon, guardian of Fob Wilson, one shot, dozens of lives saved. Alina gave a short speech, thanking them for their support and their service. She told them that she had come to Fob Wilson expecting to work alone, but had instead found a family. You taught me something important, she said. I thought my strength came from being independent, from not needing anyone, but real strength comes from trust, from knowing that your brothers and sisters in arms have your back. Thank you for having mine. The soldiers erupted in applause. Martinez presented her with a flag that had flown over the base during her mission. Chen gave her a photo book with pictures from her time at Fob Wilson. Rodriguez handed her a hand-drawn map marking all the places they had driven together. Alina accepted each gift with tears in her eyes, no longer trying to hide her emotions. Later, as she was packing her quarters, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find Lieutenant Peters standing there. Sir, she said, come in. Peters entered looking nervous. I won't take much of your time, Major. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, again, for how I treated you when you first arrived. You already apologized, Lieutenant. We're good. I know, but I've been thinking about it, about why I reacted that way. He met her eyes. I saw a small woman in a clean uniform, and I assumed you couldn't be a real soldier. I assumed you were weak or inexperienced or just lucky to be here. A lot of people make that assumption. But they shouldn't, and I shouldn't have. Peters straightened. You've taught me an important lesson about leadership. It's not about size or strength or fitting a certain image. It's about competence, courage, and commitment. You have all three in abundance. Alina smiled. You're going to be a good officer, Lieutenant Peters. You made a mistake, but you learned from it. That's all any of us can do. After he left, Alina finished packing. Tomorrow she would leave Fob Wilson and begin the next chapter of her career. But she would take this experience with her, the memory of soldiers who had started as skeptics and ended as believers. She had proven herself once again, not through words or demands, but through actions and results. She was Black Talon, and she was just getting started.